So as we go to the next talk, I realise I always forget to introduce myself. My name's Katie, I'm an RFG member, and I'm the Minutes Secretary at the moment. And our next speaker was the Minutes Secretary of the Roman Finds Group from 2014 to 2021, Evan Chapman. I'll just bring up the talk for you, and just a bit more background about Evan. Evan went to university in Cardiff and hasn't managed to escape yet, in his own words. What went from a 6-month contract, never ended, in the department, 6-month contract in the then Department of Archaeology and Numismatics of the National Museum of Wales, and has remained there ever since, and is now Senior Curator in Archaeology with day-to-day management of the archaeological stores, caring for and providing access to the collections. So thank you very much to Evan.
Okay, thank you. I hope this paper is of some interest. If it's not, it's probably a sort of moral tale about the dangers of sitting in the same corners of an archaeological store for over 30 years. Because this is probably the ultimate in slow research. This is the gradual accumulation of evidence and gradual mulling over of this problem of brooches in North Wales over my career there. And it's recently came back into the forefront of my mind because I was writing up the small collection of Roman finds from the otherwise early medieval excavations at Llanbedagog on the east coast of Anglesey. Didn't have any Roman structures, but there's clearly a Roman site somewhere near there. There was a quite interesting scatter of Roman finds, including a number of Roman brooches, which brought me back to thinking about them. This paper certainly isn't a piece of polished, finished research. It's very much the idea of throwing out some thoughts and ideas. So I'm very happy if you want to shoot some of them down in flames, just do it gently, please. I think for this group, doesn't need the normal introductions I need to give to a brooch talk. I think we all know what a Roman brooch is. We all know that they are interesting, particularly because you've got these regional variations and chronological variations that you can spot and try and tease out and wonder what they mean. And also the fact that Wales in the Roman period didn't exist. It's just the western part of Roman Britain. But at that point, I did think a bit of regional background, particularly in terms of brooches, might be useful. So dealing with Roman finds from Wales, so I think in brooch types one really has sort of three regions. Down in southeast Wales, very nice rich collection of brooches, generally of types well understood, can easily be paralleled, fits in with a nice sort of Seven Valleys, southwest England type brooch typologies. You know, you get one, you can tie it into the typology quite easily. Southwest Wales, material culturized right across in the Roman period, very thin on the ground. And it's something that's been noticed not only in brooches, but also in pottery, particularly Samian. From what you then get a high proportion of oddities, or one-offs, or very strange things. And Peter Webb's the expert in Roman pottery in Wales, has slightly humorously suggested that that's the end of the sort of trading cycle, and if you haven't managed to sell your pots by then, you just flog them off anyway because you don't want to carry them back. But it certainly has that feel. It's a very high proportion of really odd forms of Samian considering the amount, and you see something similar in the few brooches you get. What we're concentrating on today is the problem of brooches in North Wales, which until comparatively recently, we've been very few in number, and what there are have been generally very difficult to parallel regionally. You'll tend to be looking for parallels, randomly across Britain. There hasn't been a nice regional, brooch pattern you can build on. So in terms of North Wales, effectively you're actually talking about Anglesey and then a thin coastal strip, and then, as we've just been talking about, those plain lower land bits in Flintshire, and then particularly Wrexham. And for this talk, I just had a quick look at the PAS, which is made a tremendous difference to what we can start saying about brooches in Wales. And what's probably not surprising coming out is we're now getting a very striking east-west division. So for Wrexham, on a quick rough count, there are now 78 bow brooches listed. For Denbighshire, there's 70. For Flintshire, there's 68. So getting up to quite reasonably healthy numbers. And then it suddenly drops away. Conway, 15. Gwynedd, 14. And pops up slightly, not surprisingly, for Anglesey with 28. So that's what we're dealing with. So I'm proposing I start off with sort of the known and the well accepted, and then as the paper goes on, things will get a bit more speculative. So the brooch, formerly known as a Roxeter derivative, but as already mentioned, now pretty well firmly established as the Wirral type. When it was first becoming named as a Wirral type, I did humorously point out that in terms of Wales, you could equally all call it the Wrexham type because of considerable concentration in and around Wrexham. But that's really just emphasising the story is what we've now clearly got is a West Midlands, Northwest, North Wales brooch type that is, quite solidly established. A very distinctive type. There are not many brooches, closely similar to it. Once you've seen one of these, they're pretty easy to spot. In form, very simple, very straight up and down brooches. Good weight of metal, hefty brooches in the hand, and very distinguished enamel patterning on them. So I don't think there's anything controversial to say about those. That's, I think, a safe North Wales type. The other one that's sort of unknown about is established is the Prestatyn type, recognised by Creeth and published in the volume on Prestatyn, and as already mentioned, possibly made there, because we know, already mentioned, Prestatyn is a brooch production site. There are some mould fragments. Frustratingly, from the point of view of this, none that you can definitely tie into a Prestatyn-style brooch. There's certainly one, definitely a trumpet brooch being produced there. But as well as being sort of the name site, it could well be the production site for them. So very clearly, in general form, they fit into that sort of Portland Hill, dolphin-style brooch. But the key difference, which doesn't show up terribly well in the drawing, is the very straight top, the sort of back of the head, which may not sound much, but when you actually see a brooch and have one in your hand, makes a striking difference to the feel of the brooch compared to, other types of these, dolphin, Portland Hill brooches. The other thing is, a good number of them have the added enamel decoration, which is a bit more unusual in that type of brooch. And I think we can see, one can't help suspecting that whoever's designing these has probably seen some Wirral brooches. There's certainly a similar aesthetic and feel of how you decorate the bow of your brooch with these long channels of enamel. Now we start heading towards some more speculation. These are very unusual brooches. They're very difficult. They were very difficult to parallel. They're large. These are some of the largest examples of them. They're sort of 10 centimetres or so they're sort of twice to two-thirds or even twice the size of probably your average brooch. Very distinctive, absolutely flat, round head with a definite head stud or a hole that indicates the stud existed. I mean, if the term hadn't already been used, these are the ultimate head stud brooches. I say all of them are hinged with the same very simple lug mechanism on the back. We'll see later. For taking the hinge, any I've seen have evidence of iron corrosion, which suggests an iron axle pin, axle bar to take the pin. And as none of them yet have a surviving pin, I do wonder, given that fact and their size, whether they actually had iron pins. That's speculation until we find one that either proves that or disproves it. So these two were the first ones I've ever met very early in my career in the museum, because they come from the Little Orme Head hoard, scattered hoard, whatever it is. It's from metal detector finds in the days before Portal Antiquities, when details of discoveries weren't brilliantly recorded. But it's claimed to be scattered over a relatively small area and also associated with 68 coins of the late 3rd century. Personally, I suspect the association is purely locational, and they're two different things, because everything there shouts 2nd century to me at the latest, and generally you don't get mixed coin hoards and artifacts like this. But it's a very curious hoard with these very unusual brooches at the time, and looks like seriously a bit of curation going on. A whole, almost the typology of ox head escutcheons, like it feels like a collector's range of ox head escutcheons. Anyway, that's a bit by the by, but I just thought I'd show you something other than brooches. And then as one works through museums collections, one does, you start realising there are actually some other ones. So one from Scontium, the fort at Carnarvon, from the Wheeler excavations in the 1920s. I think undoubtedly another one the same, flat plate, slightly different knob in the middle, and a slightly different type of head stud. And obviously missing the bottom half, so we can't be certain, but definitely the same feel. And then this rather battered one from the castle at Ganwy, so otherwise a medieval excavation, and then this single piece of Roman archaeology. But there again, clearly of the same form, in that case missing its head stud. And then some point, this stray find from Bentley, so again, east coast of Anglesey. You can see again, undoubtedly the same form, similar sort of head stud to the other ones, but in this case with some more decoration down the shaft to the brooch. And so one sits at about 5 brooches. Difficult, I tend to put them out as a type because just they're so distinctive. And then at this point, the Portable Antiquities team starts kicking it in and increasing the numbers. I think I'm now up to 10 I'm aware of. Still generally with a really tight Northwest Wales distribution. The one from County of Wrexham is a bit of an outlier, but you can see very much the same form, slight variations in head studs. These head studs tie in rather more with the Scontium ones, one the Great Orme one, decoration on that one, I would think mirrors the Bentley one. And then if you've seen any of them, it's probably this one that was published in Britannia a couple of years ago as part of the roundup of recent finds. There again, similar, completely different style of head stud, but otherwise very similar. But outside this neat little group, really difficult to parallel, and really difficult to work out. One tends to think, one brooch type leads to another, and where do they fit into the overall brooch typology? Seeing something with a circular head, one immediately thinks, trumpet brooch. But actually, it's really difficult to find a convincing, trumpet brooch that somebody's copying and run off with an idea from. The best I've found are these two from early excavations at Roxeter, which ties in with this regional activity. But in this case, I do wonder whether we sometimes look too inwardly and think all brooches need to interrelate and forget that brooches live in a larger stylistic environment. And I just throw this out as a bit of fun. It's the sort of thing one says at a conference, but will probably never commit to paper. If you forget them being a brooch, ignore the foot and sort of mirror the head around the central knob. You end up with something that looks awfully like a tankard handle. Just throw it out there. Slightly undermined because the best parallels I can come up with for the shape actually comes from the east of England, so I wouldn't want to press this too hard. The other thing that makes me think this could be a genuine regional type is because we seem to be getting derivative or debased forms of it. These are much smaller, you can see much cruder, missing the headstart, but in overall form and feel, very similar, and I think we're up to about half a dozen of these, mostly for Anglesey. Oh, time's rushing on. So if you're thinking I'm putting a lot on about 10 brooches, I'm now going to try and convince you we may have a brooch type from 3 or possibly 4 brooches. That's something I've been thinking about for many years. This is something I'm just beginning to pick up some brooches I think may link together. This is a brooch that's been known about from a long time. It's from the Holt excavation, so excavations before the First World War, published in the 1930s. Always a difficult brooch to parallel. The best parallels for it tend to be brooches, cited as brooches from the sort of southern Severn region. But I think that's possibly the problem of comparing drawings, because the brooches they're being compared to, while in sort of shape look similar, appear to be a lot thinner and lighter. This, if you actually get it in your hand, is a chunky brooch. It's a heavy brooch. So there it's sat for nearly a century now as a bit of an anomaly. But then through the one that I haven't labelled is from the excavation at Llanbedr. This one's from Portland Antiquary Scheme, and there's another one that I've been shown from Anglesey. These have started turning up. Now you can see that they're not exact parallels, and that the form and shape is a bit different. And I think part of the contrast is the drawings. I probably should have got a photograph of the whole brooch, because I think it would tie it in a bit closer. But these are brooches that look like absolutely nothing. Indeed, the one that was sent to me from Anglesey was basically, can anything be done with it? Does it need an X-ray? But fortunately, I'd just been looking at the Llanbedr one, and I realised it was the same type. And if you look at these closely, which really doesn't show up in the photographs, they have actually got decoration, as well as being that same sort of almost sinuous, almost slug-like shape to the body, which is pretty unusual in a brooch. They've also got decoration that's reminiscent of the Holt brooch. Nothing like as definite, but with similar depressions and lantanoid, possibly leaf shapes on them. So whether the Holt fits with the 3 others, I think we've got another brooch type that looks to have a quite tight, at the moment, Anglesey stroke Holyhead distribution, but is otherwise difficult to parallel. Oh, I'm nearly out of time. So this I'm not claiming are particularly distinctive North Wales brooches, but just to remind me to say the other types of brooches one gets in North Wales are trumpet brooches, particularly this fairly squat, heavy form. We've already touched on those sort of Corden Hill trumpet brooch, brooches, and a fair scattering of head stud brooches. And so the final point about all the brooches that I've shown you this morning, and also those other types that you're getting in North Wales, is the one thing that seems to connect them all. If you get them in the hand, they feel heavy. And that may be a completely meaningless observation, but when you contrast it to the brooches I look at in South Wales, which seem to vie for how little metal you can put into a brooch and still have a brooch, these seem to be vying for how much metal can we have in one brooch. So whether it's an aesthetic or whether it's just a chance observation, I don't know. But one characteristic of a North Wales brooch is they like their quality of metal. I think I've used up my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. I'm convinced that there's some regional types there. I think we'll have time for one quick question. If anybody... Yeah, Barbara?
Just wondering, have you done any chemical analysis on the alloys?
No.
Just to repeat that, Barbara's asking if you have done any chemical analysis on the alloys.
No, that's a good suggestion, and hopefully one of the things with the big Reading project, they're looking for stuff in Wales, so that would be a good one to try and tie in.
I was just wondering if they have lots of lead in them, and that's why they're heavy, so leaded alloy. Yeah.
That's a very fair point.
Thank you very much, and if anybody else has any parallels or examples, I'm sure Evan would like to know about them over lunch later on.